You grew a company to 50 million in annual revenue and then sold it. What was the hardest thing about the entire experience?
Well, interesting. It was right around COVID when COVID hit. So we had a start and a stop. So we were talking to a couple companies the winter of 2020 was, January, February. Um, and in March, we were about to close the deal. And then, COVID hit for all of us. Um, and then, that was just a matter of survival, quite frankly. And if it wasn't for the PPP loan, I think that's what it was called. Um, we got through. There was a bad couple months, April through August. The bottom just came out of the hiring market. We were a recruiting company, but we started to see things come back in August. So that was probably the scariest part. We almost, went away. And then we recommenced discussions with one company, which ended up being Caldwell, in December, and closed the deal. So it almost never happened.
Hey, business leaders and marketers, what if your brand could be featured right here? This ad spot could be yours. This channel is watched by a dedicated audience of ambitious founders, executives, and professionals who are actively looking for tools and services to help their business grow. If you want to put your brand in front of this highly dedicated audience that's difficult to reach, I'm currently looking for a few strategic partners for the channel. To learn more about sponsorship opportunities, click the link in the description. Let's grow together. So COVID basically stopped people from hiring, and so your services weren't needed at that time.
Yeah, we dropped in 1 month or 2 months. So it was dip, dip. We dropped 75% of the business. I put people on furlough, which was ended up being a good move instead of laying them off completely. So just said, hey, I don't have work for you for now. And because we didn't know, right? Everyone didn't know what was going to happen. Um, and then, yes, I was able to start bringing people back come August. And so, and then if you remember, recruiting business went crazy, especially for tech hiring, all the tech companies. And so we rode that wave up. And like I said, we peaked at about $50 million in revenue. So, yeah, so the COVID ended up being good for us because I think a lot of companies did go out of business in our space during that period of time, and we were able to pick up a lot of the business coming out of it.
So post COVID, the business did stronger revenue growth than pre COVID.
Yeah, we were growing at 30% a year. CAGR was, we started less than a million, like I said, and grew it, from 2014 through the teens. And that's why, Caldwell and others looked to acquire us. And then COVID hit, and then we had to kind of rebuild it, but we rebuilt it quickly, and then surpassed where we were. Yeah.
And during COVID, I was building a startup and I had to pivot because we were originally building an end user messaging platform with a unique business model because all of the other platforms didn't really have a business model really. And so we had a unique spin on it. And COVID caused us to have to go into enterprise collaboration because we already had the chat infrastructure in the back end. So we just had to rebuild the front end, although it took like, a year and a half, 2 years to do. But we had the core architecture to support that. And it was only after we pivoted to try to compete with Slack that investors started to care about us.
Yeah.
It was the very, very beginning of COVID that I recognized people were going to be working remotely. That I said, hey guys, I'm sorry, but we have to kill it. We have to pivot to this other thing. We don't really know anything about it. Our team has no experience in web development. We were, building mobile apps. And, once we kind of spent time and energy retooling, then we got into a better footing and position for that. Um, and it's a far more interesting use case than what we were originally doing. So COVID was helpful for us as well.
It was a wild time, a lot of scrambling, and innovation comes out of necessity, right? And so a lot of people, us included, sounds like you too, had to pivot and get creative during that time.
I actually started the podcast like August of 2020. So I started talking to business owners and investors like a few months after the US started responding to COVID, because I was outside the US at the time, still am. And so I got to see the perspectives of people in Asia, in Europe, and the US, how they were responding to COVID and, their business and things like that. So that was very interesting, to be able to have those insights, because I was in Asia and I was stuck. Vietnam had locked the borders, so I couldn't leave. And I was like, well, if I leave, where am I going to go? I have nowhere I can go. Vietnam was probably one of the safest places at the time. So you end up selling the business. Why did you sell this business if it was making so much money?
Well, I think, first of all, when I got into the business, I was an advisor to the two founders, um, and really thought about a new model in the recruiting space. New as far as most of search business is commission based, and we decided to come at it more like a professional services business. Like a consulting business, McKinsey, or any of the big consulting firms, right? Time and materials, it is a service, but it just perplexed me why it was still based on commissions, right? Based off of the person you hired's salary, and I had 28 years in corporate as a consumer of the executive search business. And so we decided to, I talked to them about changing the model. Let's approach it differently. All my tech companies that I worked for, we hired internal staff, even at executive recruiting, because it was just a more efficient, better model. And so the idea was, well, why don't we do what, I was at Microsoft, Yahoo. Um, we had big internal recruiting teams. Why don't we create that kind of, world class recruiting engine, and then give our services to these small and medium companies that really couldn't afford to build, the type of recruiting engine that Microsoft and Yahoo could have. And that was the idea. And so then I came on to be president to execute that idea. So I was, what's the right word? Accidental entrepreneur, I guess,
Mm.
right? I was more board advisor. But then once I got into it, we really were able to build a company. Um, and, I think, like a lot of people that build things, you have a choice. You could be a lifestyle business and, just kind of be your business, or you build it to a point to have an exit at some point. And so I think when we started getting offers, the exit seemed good. The other thing is we stayed on with the company. So, I was about building things, and so I still had the opportunity to stay on. They had a 3-year hold on me, right? Like most acquisitions, when you buy management and the people, um, so I had optionality, right? If I could continue to build this organization, but at some point retire. Um, I'm 62, and so that's another thing, is that I wasn't going to do that forever. So at some point, I was going to retire. So yes, that's kind of the long-winded answer, but the context of yeah, why we ended up selling.
So I want to go into the post acquisition, but first I'm curious about the business model. You said that it was commission based, which I've I've made all of my money
What
from
was not we
I mean, originally.
Yeah, the industry was, yes, exactly, yes.
I made all of my money from commissions, and they were large commissions. So why change that into a service based model?
Perfect, perfect. So this is, if you think about what's better for the consumer, it our model was better, right? And what you pointed out is my theory of why there hasn't been as much change in this industry as in others, because it's such a good model for the Heidrick and Struggles, for the Corn Ferries, charging 33 and a third percent per search, right? Think about it. You're an executive, you're working at Microsoft, Yahoo, whatever, you're making a good salary, but that executive search guy hired 3 of your colleagues and basically their commission is the same as yours. I mean, it's crazy. It's crazy. And so, yes, that's why the search industry has been reticent to change. It's a great model for them, right? But for the consumer, and like I said, the bigger companies could try and avoid a lot of that because we could hire executive search people to come in and work at Microsoft, right? We paid them a good salary. Back then in the early 2000s, I'd say we'd pay a good executive search person 200K, probably now it's more than that, but back then, they did one search, okay, two searches for sure. They paid for themselves, right? And and so just a more effective, efficient model, cost effective for the consumer. Now, the smaller companies couldn't afford to hire in executive search caliber people to do their work and their internal teams. They may have only had 4 or 5 recruiters at all, right? And so that was the opportunity in the market was, the Googles, the Apples, the Yahoos, the Microsofts had these world-class internal recruiting teams, so they can avoid, a lot of those commissions, you know, but the small and mid-sized guys didn't. So that's why we did it. Was we saw a market opportunity, and it did work out. We had, instead of like exec search firms, you could live off of 1 or 2 good clients and make a good living. The theory was we would take advantage of the portfolio effect. We would have many smaller customers. The good thing about that is then you're not reliant on one customer being 40% of your business and all of a sudden they stop recruiting, and then and it did work out. Over those 10 years, our our largest customer uh, never got over 10% of our total revenue. And so we would run like 180, 200 customers live at a time, right? It was kind of, and so it was kind of the mutual fund approach. And so the line was more smooth, right? Like you have the portfolio of 500 stocks. We had a portfolio of companies versus investing in just say 10 companies that gave us a lot of business.
So how were you, if you only had 200 clients, how were you able to generate 50 million in revenue from them if not taking commissions with this service model?
Yeah, you charge. We would charge about 125, $115 an hour for recruiting, about 75, $80 an hour for sourcing, right?
So how much would it end up costing them for a successful hire?
We had some clients that were $1 million clients, and a couple that were well above that. So if they hired 20 of our people over a 6 month period or over the full year, yeah. So yeah, it adds up, and then you start adding up the clients. Yeah.
Okay. Interesting. Because typically these per hour kind of service businesses struggle to reach past 10 million, and so generally they will have to have like tiered packages, these like mega add-ons, things like that. Um, so you just threw more people, I guess, at it.
Yeah, we stuck with the core model, but you're absolutely right, and that you think about growing even larger, you add on services, and in fact, that's where the company I'm currently leading came about. Is while at IQ Talent, the professional services recruiting company we're talking about, um, we started developing software for our sources and recruiters internally, but saw an opportunity that could be a product or service that we could, give directly to our customers. So basically, as a recruiter and sourcer, we were using all these AI technologies, and this is before generative AI. This is, old fashioned AI, if you will,
Mhm.
predictive and just search and things like that. And there were tools out there, so my team used all of them. But what we started to create was an application interface that really had all of those tools being used, so that the user it was simple. You didn't have to know and use all those tools. You just interfaced with our application layer, and all these tools are in the background doing the work. Um, and so that was a great internal tool for my recruiters and sourcers. And the idea was, hey, we can open up the interface directly to customers and they could use it. And so you're right. When you think you're growing a professional services business like that, then at some point you have to start adding other things. So we started building it internally. And then, the downturn hit in recruiting, and right, it's interesting. Right at mid 2022, and then generative AI gets announced to the world. Basically, I mean, it was there, but to the layperson, generative AI was introduced. And so I convinced the Caldwell folks that it made sense. It was a win-win for everyone involved to let me spin out the software company, because we were investing in a software startup within a professional services company, and it's a drain on the P&L, right? And so it was good for them to make their P&L look better. It also allowed the startup to be a true startup, to get investment if needed, et cetera, and also just grow as a startup. So that's what happened, and that's Hoot Recruit now. That's the company that I'm leading. So we're a startup that basically what we're doing is creating an AI agent for the recruiting process. At this early stage, we've got the AI agent working as a candidate sourcer, so the top of the funnel part of the recruiting process. Over time, we would like to, add more to the total recruiting process, but that's where we are today.
And it's interesting because I guess when the acquisition happened, you were thinking, okay, I'm going to just do my job, wait a few years, and retire. And before that time passed, now you find yourself leading another startup.
Yeah,
And I guess you've been able to get the extra bonus that was tied to those handcuffs, but you don't have those handcuffs anymore because I guess you have a new
correct.
contract as the founder of maybe not
Yeah, no, totally split.
founder.
Yes. Yeah, so part of the deal of spinning out is that the new company really had to be totally separate. Otherwise, Caldwell would have to report up as a subsidiary into their books. So that, I think, was a great uh, in making sure that this is a separate company. So Caldwell is passively has equity at 20%. Um, Above that threshold, there'd be concern about undue, control or influence. They have no board seat. They have no influence. So we truly are separate. And at the same time, I had to separate completely from Caldwell. Otherwise, if I was on both sides, then they would say there was some influence. So yeah, it's a totally separate startup now.
But have they given you money to run the business?
No, they did give me all the IP because, again, when we built this, we were inside the company. So technically, it was their IP, right? But that was part of the deal. The spin out is we get all the IP. They maintain 20%.
Are they giving you any other support? I know you said they don't have a board seat, but are they giving you advice? Are they connecting you with their investors or clients for this?
No, we're totally separate. And again, I was running IQ Talent where we were building this. So it was Caldwell was the parent company, and they pretty much run a separate executive search type business. So um, yeah, for what we're doing at Hoot Recruit, you know, the contacts would be sort of my contacts and people at Hoot Recruit more than Caldwell per se, anyways.
What's the benefit of having an agent to do this work?
Yes, I mean, big productivity gains at this point, right? At this point, it's mainly about the productivity gains. As AI gets better and better, I think there will be a time where you can say the AI will be as good and maybe even better in quality. But right now, it's mainly the productivity gain. And we've designed our application to make sure the human is still in the loop. So the recruiter or the user, because of for qualitative checks, right, and judgment calls. We believe that's the best state of design for AI applications and AI agents today. But as it gets better, there may be a time where you can just let the AI agent run through the whole process without a human. I don't believe we're there yet, but the way we're approaching this is as the AI gets better, we can also change the application's functionality, right, to take advantage of it. So right now, it's huge productivity gains for the recruiters. So if you think about the candidate sourcing process, you get a job spec. I'm looking for a principal engineer with machine learning experience in the Nashville area, right? Um, okay, let's go look at a bunch of resumes, try and find those people. As a sourcer, you have to source through. The AI can do that like that now, right? And so it just saves a lot of time and productivity at the top of the funnel. The AI is very good at doing that, right? Looking through something, matching, summarizing, giving you the information. And then we still leave it for the recruiter to look at, say, the short list of people that the AI surfaced up and make the ultimate call. Yep, that's a good candidate. No, not quite. Yes, it's a good candidate. No, not quite. So that's what Hoot Recruit does. And then we also allow the user to have engagement campaigns through our software. Again, the AI can customize messaging between here's the search spec, right, what's required for the job. Here's the profile. Let me put together a nice messaging that marries it together and send it out to that user to try and encourage them to become a candidate. So that's the top of the funnel part of recruiting, right? Finding people that are matched to your search spec and then engaging them so that they can become a candidate. Once they are a candidate, that's then now it's further part of the recruiting process. You're doing the interview assessments and so forth. Right now, we're just doing that very top part, what we call the candidate sourcing part of recruiting. And so, we talk about Hoot Recruit as a agentic candidate sourcer.
It's important, I think, that you have kept the human in the loop, because I've spoken to other people that are in the recruiting business, and they've attempted to remove the human from the loop and then realized that it was a bad idea and put the human back in.
Yes, yes.
I've tried. Obviously, this is a slightly different example, but I was working with several designers for designing things for my podcast, for example, different kinds of thumbnails and shorts, videos, and all these kinds of things. And I had fired one of them because I felt like there was an AI tool that could do it better. Well, when I compared the results in terms of views and likes and just engagement on those videos and those designs between the AI and the human, I realized that the human still did a better job. Even though the AI was faster and could do a good job, the human was consistently providing better results all around. So I decided to go back to the human. So I think companies are, especially public companies or big companies that have boards of directors and shareholders that are vocal, are probably all finding that while there's a rush to implement AI within the business operations, that they will very quickly go, whoops, I probably shouldn't have fired those 10,000 employees or those 100 employees, because the AI isn't really capable of doing those things better than a human
Yeah,
can.
not completely capable, but just like in your example, I would say your human user could use AI to do quick drafts and other things, right? But ultimately, if they're in the position to make the final judgment, the final edits, right, on the creative, the final judgment of what's good, that's the best use case, and that's kind of the parallel of what we're doing in the recruiting space, right? Is making sure that the recruiter user is still the one that makes the ultimate decisions, the editing, the final judgment calls, but speeds up, those other aspects that what this human would have done. So it's a productivity tool mainly today. When it gets better, then maybe we could replace that person totally for that task, for that process. But today, I believe the best state of application using AI is to use it where it creates good productivity gains for the user in that business process. Um, Eventually, the dream of eliminating that human in that business process will happen, and it will happen quicker in processes that are more deterministic, versus where you have judgment. Okay. I mean, those processes where you still need human judgment will be the last ones that the AI agents will take over.
I think recruiting is safe for a while for this because like there was a lot of backlash in the last few years where people were saying the AI is looking at my resume and then tossing it because I am not from Harvard or I am not, a white male. Like it can tell from my name that I'm a black female and so it just discarded me.
Yeah. The probability that you are. Yes, exactly. That's the way it works. Yeah.
So, in order for companies to truly have the ability to surface the best people to hire, they have to ignore what they look like, which is, I know, a huge problem in the US. And if an AI algorithm is developed by a white male in his 40s, it's probably going to want to surface white men in their 40s for those jobs. I don't know, maybe not. But there will be some bias, and so the AI has to be able to focus on the value a person brings, not what they look like or what their name is, so that the human can do their job properly and get the best people. So I believe you're safe for a while.
Yes. Yes. You still need human recruiters in the loop for at least the rest of my business career.
And
Yeah.
you were talking earlier about these people hired by these larger companies getting paid a few $100,000 a year. And if they get two people hired, then they've done their job. I feel like that's great. Like I'd be happy with, three, $400,000 a year job to recruit two people. That's
Well, obviously, we want them to hire more than two. I'm just saying the economics was that they paid for themselves, and so yes, so they pay for themselves way more over than just the two hires because they typically do way more than that.
in all of this, all of the work you've done in your life. What's the most important thing that you've learned?
Wow, that's like a big metaphysical question. Um, well, I think there's a couple things that are pertinent to organizations, whether they're big or small. Um, from a leadership perspective, the types of people you hire, whether you're in a big company or a small company, um, character matters, and especially at the bigger companies, because when you're hiring executives at one of these big companies, someone's going to be competent at all the things you need, right? You're hiring a CMO, you're hiring a chief technical, you're hiring a sales leader. They're going to be good at what they do. And the differentiator between who's really going to be great for your team and your organization versus not are usually the character issues, right? Is this someone you can trust? Do they have integrity? Are they a team player? Are they working for the benefit of the total organization first and secondarily for themselves? Or do they prioritize what's good for them first versus the team, right? Those sort of character, some call them soft issues. To me, they're not soft, right? Those are the things that really make or break, right? Someone being great for your organization or not. And then the other thing I would say is culture of your organization is important. Um, you can have rules and policies, right? Um, but you can't legislate what I'm doing all the time as a person in your organization, as an employee. And that's where culture comes in, right? Culture are those unwritten, oftentimes, but known norms, acceptable behaviors, right? That this organization accepts or doesn't accept. And that really governs your behavior when no one's looking. And so culture, I think, is very important for companies to think about. What is your culture? What are those norms? Um, and let's be clear, every organization of a certain size has a culture. Whether you've purposefully tried to create it in a way, but in absence of actively trying to create a culture, culture does happen, right? Over time, it's just human interaction and the behaviors that get accepted over time. So those are the two things that I would say are universally important, that I've learned across whether you're a large organization or a small organization.
Thanks for watching. If you liked this insight, I've handpicked another video for you right here on the screen. For more actionable strategies that get you real results, hit subscribe.